Department of the
Good evening, everyone. It is December 12th. We're here for a work session of the City Council. We're going to begin with public comment on non-agenda items. If you're here to make any public comment on items not on the agenda, please come forward in the room or raise your hand if you are on Zoom. We'll let you into the room. Seeing none, I'll close that public comment period. We're going to move on to our first work session, which is recycling education. Director Webb. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm actually not presenting tonight, but I'm going to do quick introductions. J.R. Slingerland, our Solid Waste Division Manager, and Charles Hoyt, our Recycling and Diversion Coordinator, are going to present for the city tonight. And then Curtis Gardner will be on. He's with Waste Management. Waste Management has been our partner since the beginning of single stream recycling started about 14 years now. So we've worked closely with them. They do all our transport and sorting down in Denver. JR and Charles are going to talk about our local recycling and diversion efforts and programs here in town. They're going to talk to you a little bit about the outreach and education that they've been working on. Charles's position, the Recycling and Diversion Coordinator, is fairly new. City Council authorized that position in fiscal year 23, so Charles has been in that position for just over a year and is doing some good work over there. I think you guys are going to be excited about. Waste Management is going to talk about our contamination rate that always comes up and our audit results and some recycling in general. I wanted to take this opportunity because I'm not going to be at the next regular meeting, and so I want to say Merry Christmas if I don't see you all before then.
Well, thank you, Director.
So with that, I'll
Merry
turn it
Christmas
over
to you too.
JR.
Thank you. Mr. Slingerland, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Mayor, council members, of course, my name is J.R. Slingerland. I'm the Solid Waste Manager, and I'm going to be talking about some of our recycling education efforts that we've done recently to educate the public about our recycling programs and programs that the City of Laramie doesn't do, but may be available to the citizens of Laramie. As Director Webb stated, one of the biggest things that we've done recently is employ Charles Hoyt as our Recycling and Diversion Coordinator. He's able to coordinate within the division, within the City of Laramie, with other departments such as parks, and with organizations within Laramie. So it would be good to step back and kind of look at what we have in the City of Laramie for recycling programs and what is available elsewhere in the City of Laramie. For the City of Laramie directly, we of course have our single stream recycling program. That's the blue lidded container. And if you don't have a blue lidded container, you can always go out to the recycling center. That's a drop-off area for those materials. We also have a composting facility out at the landfill. That is biosolids composting, green waste composting, and just a little bit of food waste is in there. That would be fruit from your garden, vegetables from your garden, and that type of thing. We also have a battery program that encompasses lead acid batteries, rechargeable batteries such as nickel cadmium, and those types of things. We also recycle tires, metal, e-waste, and our newest program is glass that we started recently. Other options in Laramie, not directly under the City of Laramie, would be grocery bags. There are a couple stores within Laramie that will take grocery bags, bubble wrap, air pillows, and those types of film, and they will send it off to be recycled into plastic decking and those types of materials. We also have the option in Laramie for cooking oil recycling behind Mingle's Lounge. And Charles was able to recently find an option for candy wrappers during Halloween at the open school. For food, there are a lot of opportunities for residents to donate food. There's several organizations that will accept that. And we also encourage residents to practice backyard composting, and we educate when they call us and ask our advice on how to set that up into their backyard. Other options in Laramie are donating and reusing items such as clothing and furniture. So let's take a look at how we're doing this past year. This is from November 22nd, or November 2022 to November 2023. Over that course of that period, we recycled or diverted 5,984.41 tons. So almost 6,000 tons of material did not end up in the landfill. That extends that life slightly for other materials that are more appropriate to become entombed into there. As you can see in there, the biggest constituent of what we do is the compost. That's 2,912 tons of biosolids we took in and 4,818 tons of green waste for a total of 7,730 tons. And the composting process breaks that down. So as you can see, a little more than half of that, or a little less than half of that broke down just in that natural process before being sold or given away to the public and organizations within Laramie. An interesting thing that I noticed while putting these numbers together, if you look in the lower right-hand side of the screen there, about 40% of the landfill and recycling center traffic has something to do with recycling and diversion. This could be somebody bringing out their household waste and they've got a couple of glass bottles to recycle, or a battery to recycle, or maybe they're bringing in some hazardous waste by appointment and they bring out some other stuff to dispose of or recycle. So that, quite a bit, not quite half, but we're getting there. So there is that interest within Laramie. And then the next biggest thing, of course, is our single stream program. So to go over the single stream program very quickly, we of course have the blue lidded container. You set that out on your collection day. The truck comes around, picks it up, brings it and drops it off to the recycling center. It should be noted at the recycling center, we don't sort things. We don't sort them into piles of bottles, piles of cardboard, paper, and so on. We're more of a bulking system there where we bulk it up to bale. Bales are the most efficient way to get that down to Denver. The only type of sorting we might do is if we notice a lot of trash or contamination mixed into the recycling, we'll go in and pull that out. And unfortunately, we can't be too meticulous when we pull out little scraps of paper shreds and stuff, so we have to take some of the recyclables out when we grab that. But otherwise, everything just gets baled, gets put into a 53-foot box trailer and sent down to waste management where they actually do the processing and all of that. And I won't get into too much detail because waste management will be discussing that more in depth in their presentation. But the biggest thing here where we can make a difference is on that first step at the household, educating the residents what is appropriate to put in there and what is not. So the tip of our spear for doing that is our Laramie Waste and Recycling app. That app has a lot of different tools in there. For example, allows everyone to stay on schedule so you're not missing your collection day. Lets you know if there's a winter storm where we've got to delay it, and then we'll pick it up the next day. It also keeps you informed of the landfill recycling center of hours of operation if you wanted to go out there and drop off your recycling. And we also announce our special programs such as our landfill vouchers and the county vouchers when those are available. But as far as education, the biggest thing on there is what's called the Goes Where search tool. There are hundreds of items behind that search tool, and residents can actually suggest items if they're not in there by clicking suggest, typing it in. Charles and I will review it and figure out what to do with it, whether that's through one of our programs or somewhere else in Laramie. The informational campaigns that we routinely do, those are also on there as brief messages and recycling tips, if you will. So we call this our Find Out Friday because we tend to do them on Fridays or towards the end of the week. And this is just a small sampling of what we've done recently. As you can see, we do a lot on plastic, so we try to keep people on the same page. Plastics 1 and 2 in the shape of a bottle, jar, or jug. No plastics 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 are unnumbered. No buckets, no plastic bags, that type of thing. Recently, we had a compost your pumpkins and gourds out at the landfill. Bring it out, get it composted. Our batteries are on there, of course. Leaf season. It varies on the messaging depending on the season, on what's appropriate. And also, Charles and I look into the app to see what people are searching for and see what's popular that people are wondering about, and then we'll promote that out to the community as a whole. And in the lower right-hand corner, you can see our glass when we announced that earlier. So it's kind of small tidbits of information. Sometimes the topic is important enough that we go into more clarity and in-depth information on it. For example, plastic bags. We actually did a 3-part series on that: reduce, reuse, and recycle. And if you look in the center there, the reuse one, this is where we're able to coordinate with other departments within the city, because we help the Parks Department promote their efforts with plastic bags to use that within the parks. We also worked with the stores, Safeway and Walmart, as they have the drop-off locations. Under recycle, we pointed out which materials are acceptable and which were not in their program. So just a little easier way to get more information out on that. So everybody's familiar with our orange tags. I think if you do something wrong with your carts, we thought we'd do a little bit of a more gentler and kinder way of informing the residents with our OOPS tag. This came about when we started our glass recycling program. We had about 1% of glass in the recycling, which isn't accepted, but less than 1% wasn't too big of a deal. We noticed when we started accepting glass, residents were a little confused, and there was more glass in the recycling cart, up to about 3% on one of the audits. So we started the upper left-hand corner OOPS tag just to say, oops, you put some glass in here, it's not recyclable in the cart, you actually have to take that out to the recycling center, or if you can't do that, it's got to go in the trash. On the next audit, we were back to under 1%. So our staff has looked at that and picked a few more items that we feel are worthwhile for the residents to get a friendly little nudge to correct the size of the cardboard, or they may have their recycling cart out on the wrong day, or one of our bigger things is we get a lot of styrofoam in the recycling cart. So we also go out into the community. The background image there is an image from a school thank you card that was sent to Charles, thanking him for presenting at the school. That coincides with the center picture down there that the kids drew of a little cart and garbage can and that type of thing. So it's a good way to interact with the community. Charles and I always have fun talking to the school kids. We do a lot of different events where we distribute our magnets, which is another way we try to get the public educated, and we distribute a lot of reusable bags. So Charles was able to go to the University of Wyoming Welcome Fair when the new students came in, distribute those bags and talk to any students that might be living off campus with what our recycling program entails and how they could go through their landlord and possibly request a recycling cart for their residents, or how the recycling center would work for a drop-off. And we've also provided specialized flyers. The upper left-hand corner, that was for the farmers market. They had requested some recycling carts. We put the carts out, and our collection crews noticed there was some contamination. So working with the event organizers, we were able to customize it to those particular materials that we were seeing a lot of what is recyclable and what is not recyclable. The same is true for the lower left-hand corner. That was made for the airport, so they could meet their recycling requirements for some funding that they were receiving in order to recycle and to get some money out there. So customized messaging for them. We've also been at Touch a Truck, where we've distributed our materials. And with Albany County, we help them with their voucher program, the refrigerators and tires. Again, both those materials are recyclable. So contamination, we still do get some in there. On here, you'll see like a diaper. We get a lot of those. I'm not sure quite what the thinking is. I guess they're somewhat plastic on the outside of it, but we don't want those in there. The green waste, once again, people may think that we're sorting things out, but we don't do the sorting. You actually have to know what goes in there and what doesn't. Are our education efforts making a difference? Well, yeah, they are. Recently, we were paying a contamination fee because we were over 15%. Through our efforts and other means, we were able to get that under 15%, and our contamination extra rate has been removed, saving us $7 a ton when it goes down to Denver. So it's been very worthwhile in that education. Of course, we're not going to stop, even though we're underneath there. We'll continue to promote the app and our webpage. If you haven't been to our webpage, please check it out. There is a lot of good information on there. We continue to educate during interactions, whether that's through a phone call, somebody asking on there, we'll take the time to sit with them and get them corrected on what they need to understand. The solid waste staff email, all of the signatures contain links to our app and webpage. The back of our businesses cards contain information about our app, and we continue to use social media for our little informational flyers. Looking ahead, we're going to get into more special events. We've got trucks that obviously drive all around town with a big white canvas, so we're thinking of putting some messaging on the side of those. Some of the tips of the day, like plastic bags or styrofoam, the app, those types of things. And never ending, here, especially here in Laramie, there are always new students and residents to educate. So that concludes our part of the presentation there. I would entertain any questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Slinger, and getting that contamination rate below 15% is great news. Thank you for sharing that. Council members, do you have any questions? Councilor Newman, and then Councilor Gabriel, Councilor O'Doherty after that.
So I know you go to the university. Do you go to LCCC and Wyotech as well on their welcome student days as well?
We have not yet. We have not had the opportunity yet, but that is on our plan to get into those events as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Gabriel, and then Councilor O'Doherty.
Thanks, Mayor. JR, tell me about what happens with plastics 3 and above. For instance, the yogurt cartons and all that. Do you pick those out? Because I think a lot of people are not aware that those are not recyclable.
Councilor, through you, Mayor. We don't pick any of those out unless there's a large pile of that together that we see in the recycling that's dropped off at the landfill. And
So
stuff.
anything like 3 and above?
Right. We don't do any of the sorting unless
That's
there's
just
a lot
part of
it.
the contamination fee that you'll, okay.
Right. Once again, we don't have that extra fee of contamination. The plastics you're referring to, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but they're very small, typically less than 3%, if I remember correctly.
And then I noticed that some of the residents told me that because Laramie doesn't recycle some of the plastics, they take them to Fort Collins. Are you aware of that?
Through you, Mayor. We have a lot of residents that continue to take the materials to Fort Collins. We are very similar, I believe, in the materials that we do. Fort Collins, in addition to what we do, does tubs and those types of things. My understanding, it goes to waste management where we send our stuff. So when we look at redoing our contract, that's definitely something we could look at again, see if those markets have come back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor O'Doherty, please.
So my understanding is that the commodities market is really fluctuates wildly, and so while we may be able to add tubs, probably they're going to end up in the trash down at Waste Management. So I think we have to be careful about that. My question is, what's not clear in any of those flyers, and nobody believes me when I tell them, is that 1 and 2 plastics are not acceptable unless they're in the form of a jug or a jar. So I think the flyers need to show in the non-acceptable things like cups, like beer cups, and berry, the little clamshells that hold berries. And when I was working at the farmer's market, people were telling me, I'm like, no, it doesn't go there. And they'd show me the bottom. I'm like, yeah, ignore that. It doesn't go there. And so there was very little at the farmer's market that was actually recyclable, because mostly what people were tossing out were cups and just like food garbage. So I'm hoping to hear from Waste Management, other cities that have this constraint where we can only take 1 and 2 only if it accepts a screw top. How do they convey that to people? I saw that Fort Collins has a nice video saying, don't pay attention to the arrows, pay attention to the shape. And I thought that was a good way to do it. And I would really like Waste Management to help us with producing stickers that show exactly what can go in those blue bins, that we put those proactively instead of the, just, after somebody's already contaminated the whole block with their styrofoam. I would like to ahead of time, make sure people understand that, don't put styrofoam in there, but, only put in these things. So you don't have to answer that now, but I'd like to hear about how other cities make that distinction between the cups and the berry clamshells versus the other 1 and 2. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. If you have anything to add there, you're welcome to, but otherwise we'll move on. Councillor Pierce, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank our recycling folks for all their efforts and all their education. And I spent a little bit of time with Councilor Doherty at the farmers market. And I think, frankly, the more we can do to incentivize folks who participate in the farmers market to use recyclable products or containers, I think that would help, especially, during those busy Friday, late Friday afternoons. But anyway, I just want you guys to know I really appreciate all the work that you do. And if there's anything you want from us, especially next summer at the farmers market, I'd be more than happy to do that again. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Pierce. Any other council members? I think, I would echo what Councillor Pierce said. I had been mulling over this thought of, should we keep recycling plastics? Because if it's just going to continue to increase our contamination rate and we're going to be paying extra, it's so confusing for folks, would we be better off? And be clear, I'm not suggesting we do this, but I'm saying it's been a thought in my mind that maybe it would be worthwhile for us to consider plastic and aluminum as our, and sort of like metals as our recycling. And I might have said that wrong. I meant paper and metals as our single stream, and then have options for plastics. But I might be. Sounds like that's no longer as much of a concern since our contamination rate is down, thanks to your good work. Director Webb, did you have something to add there?
I was just going to say, Mayor, as far as the plastics go, we understand the confusion and are trying to tackle it. I think Waste Management's going to be able to speak to some of that. I think what Councilor Doherty said, maybe they can help us with some suggestions of what other communities are doing. There's a fantastic idea.
Okay.
I looked up real quick, our November contamination for 337 plastic was 1.9%.
Cool.
So 1.9% everything we sent down was 3 to 7 plastic. So pretty
great.
small number.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Good, thank you. Councilor Newman, did you have something to add?
Do we know how much, like in a given month, we were paying for this overage? I know it was $7 a ton, but how many tons do we normally send down there?
Councilor, through you, Mayor. We send about 120 tons a month down to Denver.
Okay. Cool. Councilor Richardson?
I couldn't hear that. Could he repeat that, please?
100 to 120 tons a month.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. And Director Webb, am I correct in understanding that Mr. Gardner has a presentation as well? Great. Well, Mr. Gardner, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us.
Good evening, council members. Appreciate the opportunity to present tonight. And am I going to share my screen, or JR, are you going to share my presentation?
I believe the city clerk has your presentation pulled up for us. It's about to
And I appreciate the questions on the education and other communities. So I am going to touch on that in that presentation. And we do have some ways that we can help you all with that. So
that's great. Okay. And we can see your presentation now. You should see it as
great. Yep. Well, I again appreciate the opportunity to present this evening, and so I'm going to kind of go through a little bit about the entire life cycle of recycling. We're going to talk some about collection in this presentation. Now, while we don't do your collection, I think there's some interesting tidbits that you'll be able to gather, and just kind of talking about what this whole lifestyle looks like. Really, at the end of the day, for recycling to work, you need to be able to collect the material, you need to be able to process the material, and you need to be able to sell the material. And so there's kind of three major steps in that life cycle. And as part of this presentation, we're going to talk about that. So again, my name is Curtis Gardner. I'm Public Sector Solutions Manager for Waste Management. So I manage our municipal and higher education relationships in Colorado and Wyoming. My contact information is on there, so please feel free if you ever have questions or want to meet, please reach out. And I'll mention it again at the end, but also if anyone would ever like to come see the recycle sorting facility in Denver, if you're ever down that direction, would love to take you on a tour. It's a really neat facility, and as part of my presentation, we'll watch a short little video that shows a little bit about how that sorting process works, so you can see that in a little bit more detail. So a couple things we're going to talk about. First, we'll talk about contamination and audit results. Next is why recycling is important, and then as part of that life cycle, what makes something recyclable, and then where can people make an impact. And then lastly, I want to talk just some about the investments that Waste Management is making in sustainability, both in Wyoming and Colorado and across the U.S. We've invested hundreds of millions of dollars to increase diversion rates and to take more away from the landfill. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So first, I want to show you your year-to-date audit results. And so this is basically, we literally take loads that come in and we audit the material by hand. And so I believe we performed 4 audits year-to-date. So this, with that many audits, will give you a pretty good idea of what your stream is looking like. So 52%, biggest percentage obviously is cardboard. And then the other fiber is other types of paper material, newsprint, and things like that. Plastic, just under 10%. Metal, that's going to primarily be aluminum, and then a very, very small amount of glass, and then again, a small amount of residue. Next, I want to talk about contamination rates. Your contamination rates are 13.2%, and as was previously stated, once you fall below that 15% threshold, you no longer pay additional charges for contamination. So you can see on here, I put some other municipalities, just so you can kind of compare what the city of Laramie to other municipalities. So there's in the North Denver metro area, 11.9%, a Colorado Mountain Resort Town over 20%, a county in northern Colorado is at 16.2%, and then I'm in the Four Corners market area, so covers the Four Corners states. So I included a couple of other municipalities in my market area. So a city in the Phoenix metro area is at 14%, another city in the Phoenix metro area just shy of 30%, and then a similarly sized college town in Utah that has a contamination rate of 27.3%. So as you can see, Laramie's performing very well as it's compared to most of those places.
Mr. Gardner, are you okay taking questions as you go? I see Counselor has their hand up.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
I just want to clarify, thank you, Mr. Mayor, the percentage, is it percentage of weight or volume?
Weight, tonnage, yep.
Thank you.
Correct.
Thank you, Counselor. All right, back to you, Mr. Gardner.
All right. So just want to talk a little bit about why recycling is important. Obviously, it saves resources, water, energy, raw materials, avoiding greenhouse gas emissions, and then lastly, giving materials a second life. And Waste Management is really dedicated to being a part of that entire life cycle and ensuring that we can increase recycling in the communities in which we operate. So recycling closes the loop. Basically, I think everyone knows this, but recycling turns good quality material, good quality resources into new materials. So one example is we work with a company, a manufacturer called Continuous, where we turn mixed paper and plastic into roof boards. Plastic bottles become clothing, aluminum cans can be recycled and back on the shelf sometimes in as little as 30 to 60 days. So those, again, are just some examples of, once that material is collected and if it can be properly processed, how we can put it back into new material. So first, I want to talk a little bit about what makes something recyclable curbside. At the start of my presentation, I mentioned there were really three main elements in ensuring that material can be recycled. The first is collection. So it needs to be collected. And I have a slide later that shows some of the material that showed up at our MRF. But I commonly get asked is, something that's made of otherwise recyclable material, like a propane canister. Metal's recyclable, so why is a propane canister not? Well, it's compressed, and so if we were to process it through our sorting facility, it would explode and potentially cause a fire. There are obviously other ways to recycle those non-recyclable materials, but it first has to be safely collected. Next is processed. So you'll see a picture inside of one of our MRFs, but the next step in that recycling life cycle is the ability to properly process materials. The video that I'm going to show is going to show that sorting process, and you'll really see why, certain things may or may not be accepted from residential recycling and why it has to be a certain level to be processed. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit on this, is removing contamination. And the video I'm going to show is going to talk about this a little bit. But we use three main methods of sorting at our facilities. So mechanical, optical, and humans. You can see on there's a picture of folks that work on the conveyor belt, and it's very fascinating if you ever come to the facility to see, but they literally pick off material that can't be processed. And so that's the very first step in the process, is that belt line, that pre-sort line. And then from there, it goes into the other mechanical and optical sorters. Lastly is the ability to sort materials in that process of processing. So on here, you'll see some examples of machines that we use to sort recyclable material. And then, if that's all right, I think you all have control, but I have a video next that can show a little bit about that process. It should be on one more slide. Here we go. So if you wouldn't mind playing that video.
Mr. Gardner, it looks like when we click on that, it just takes us to the next slide.
Would it be possible for me to share my screen and show that video?
Believe we can pull that off. Give us just a sec.
Okay. I think it's really important to see the sorting process to get an idea of that contamination. And
Yep, no problem at all. Yeah, you should see that invitation to be a host now.
okay.
We all know it's a good idea to recycle. But what happens to that aluminum? We all know it's a good idea to recycle. But what happens to that aluminum can or all that paper after you put it in the recycling bin? Where does it go? What does it become in its second life? How does this water bottle become a backpack? Jeans or shoes or even a WM shirt? Let's find out. This is a material recovery facility, or a MRF, and this is where the real work of recycling begins. Here at the MRF, the WM trucks unload all their material onto what we call the tip floor. Next up, a trip to a massive conveyor belt that takes all this material to a pre-sort room. Here's where sorters work by hand to remove stuff that's not going to recycling. Stuff like batteries, plastic bags, Christmas lights, clothes, pretty much anything that can clog or break the MRF's equipment, or worse, hurt one of the employees. Now that we've minimized contaminants, the real sorting can begin. Cups, cans, containers, and bottles are separated from newspaper and other paper materials. Then comes the eddy current. This part is pretty cool. An electric current zaps the aluminum off the conveyor belt and into a metal-only stream. All these materials are separated and compacted into bales, like hay bales. Forklifts move the bales into a finished product area where they inspect it for quality. Once they get the thumbs up, these bales of metal, plastic, and paper are shipped around the country to different companies that'll give them a second life or turning them into new stuff. This process is all about creating this circular economy where everything is being reused and recycled so that less stuff ends up in a landfill. Last year, WM recycled 10 million tons of material across 103 facilities like this one across the country. That's amazing, but we can do even more, and you can help by recycling right.
I appreciate the opportunity to share that. Again, I think it really demonstrates the importance of what goes in curbside, because ultimately it has to be sorted and processed to be able to sold to the end market. And then lastly, like I mentioned, is really the end markets. And I think the end of that video really demonstrated that those bales after they're processed, and that's ultimately what goes to manufacturers and other users of that material to be able to turn it into a second life. Here are just a few examples of things that we are part of that circular economy. So the Waste Management Phoenix Open, many of you have probably heard of that golf tournament. It's the largest zero waste sporting event on earth. Last year, we had over 800,000 people come through, and all material from that event is captured and recycled. I talked before about plastic and other materials being turned into roofing material, and then the last picture of the purse, the bag on there, is a demonstration. It shows plastic that can be turned into fiber to make textiles and bags and other things like that. So here's where I'm going to get into a little bit about the education piece. So on the slide that says what's recyclable, you'll see on there, we produce material, and I'm going to show some examples later. We call it our Recycle Right campaign. And what we try to do is we try to create graphical representations of what isn't recyclable. It's been our philosophy, and what we found, in the hundreds and hundreds of communities in which we operate, that the easier we can make recycling for folks, the better that material is going to be and more is going to be diverted. So we try to create graphical representations of the major categories of what's recyclable. So you'll see the plastic bottles in the middle there, on the top, aluminum, cans, the newsprint and cardboard, that's the newsprint, and then at the bottom left, the cardboard. So what we try to communicate is if it's not in one of these pictures, it should go to the landfill. And why that is because as you go through that sorting process, it can contaminate this good material, and then you don't get the good quality product that you need at the end. Because ultimately, it doesn't do any good for folks to put things in a recycle bin if that material can't be reused into a second life. And so we try to make it as simple as possible. We're going to talk a little bit later about areas where we can all make improvements in recycling. But first, I want to show a couple more examples. So next, food and liquid ruin recyclables. So, you don't need to make sure your peanut butter jar is removed of every drop of peanut butter or anything like that. But high amounts of liquid and other food contaminants can ruin the material that's in there. And so we educate our communities to remove that before those go in the recycling bin. Next is plastic bags. Unfortunately, there are plastic bags that are sold or marketed through places like Amazon and Walmart as recyclable bags. Those bags are not recyclable in our sorting process because those bags will clog the machines, and so we encourage material to be put into a bin before sorting without any bags in the bin. Next, I want to show just some examples of some things that we've removed from our sorting line, and that those are real. Live animals, firearms, diapers, sink, I mean, all kinds of things that have been sent to us in recycling containers. And so these are both, hazards of our employees, the things that they may have to face, but also potential contaminants of that material. And so just, I always like to show just some of those examples of some of the things we've seen, because it never ceases to amaze me, the things that come in recycle bins. So here's a graphic showing what is not recyclable curbside. So basically everything else that's not in one of those graphics that I showed up at the front. So plastic takeout containers, waxy cartons, shredded paper, clothes, yard waste, batteries, medical waste. I won't read through the whole list, but a lot of pretty much anything else that's not in one of those graphics that I showed at the beginning. Next, I want to move a little into kind of where we can all make an impact. So first, protecting the environment and community by keeping hazardous waste out of trucks and landfills. Batteries, for example, can cause fires. At our Denver South facility in Inglewood, just south of Denver, last year, our recycle transfer station had a fire where the entire complex burned down, and it was the result of a lithium-ion battery in the recycling. Other ways you can make a difference: only buying what you need, purchasing goods with recyclable content. And that really goes back to that circular economy. The more that we utilize products made from recyclable content, the more of a market there's going to be for that material. Recycling correctly at home and at work, advocating for recycling at work if you don't have it. And then again, just want to reiterate, keeping that dangerous waste out of the landfill. Here's the three basic tenets, our philosophy of how residents can recycle right and how we can make the best impact. First, it starts with each of us. We all make a big difference. It depends on what we put into the bin. And, I showed the slide of the animals and the other things like that. But it really speaks to, as we put things into the bin, that's the first line of defense, that ensuring that material that comes out after the sort process is good material that we can send to an end market. And then lastly, keeping, anything that doesn't belong in there. Obviously kind of the animals and things are kind of exotic, but really anything that doesn't belong in the recycle bin, that's the first line of defense to ensuring that good material. So next, I want to show just some examples of our Recycle Right marketing materials that we have. So on there, I have our Recycle Right website. It's wm.com/recycleright. And on that website, we use that to link to in our communities. But beyond that, we produce, and we can work with your city staff, whether it's communication staff or whomever else, to produce materials that can really help people know what is and isn't recyclable. And those are customized. Every community accepts different material. Every community sorts it differently. Some communities we do the collection, some communities we don't. So every community is different. And so this is kind of a very generic example, but we can work with your city staff to customize that material directly to the city of Laramie. Next, I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing to shape recycling markets. So in the past decade, Waste Management has invested over $1 billion in recycling infrastructure and have another $680 million planned from 2023 through 2025. And that really is upgrades to our facilities. The video that we showed is our Salt Lake City MRF. That is one of the latest and greatest MRFs in the entire country. In Southeast Denver and Aurora, we are in the process of building a facility that should be online in 2024, 2025, that is going to be even larger and have more capability than that Salt Lake City facility that we showed on there. And so, you know, the other piece of it is, and I know there's a lot of questions about China and kind of how that's developed back here domestically. That really hasn't been a thing since about 2017, but we were this first company to stop shipping our mixed plastics overseas, specifically to China, in response to concerns about plastic in the environment. Next, I want to show just a little bit about, you know, in more detail, some of the tools that we're using in our MRFs. And by 2025, we predict that 95% of the volume flowing through our MRFs will be processed in a state-of-the-art facility that includes these type of robots and machines. So optical sorters, as the material goes down the conveyor belt, a camera will take a picture of that material, and then it sends a message to a robotic arm, and the robotic arm will pick up material that it sees as contamination. Scanners, cameras, and then fire suppression technology. The video showed one example of the reverse current where we can pull out aluminum cans. That's later on in the recycling process when we're down to plastic, glass, and aluminum, and that's just one more step in that sorting process. Next is a map of our recycling infrastructure. So you can see there are 5 facilities in Colorado, and that's, you know, obviously where the material from the city of Laramie goes. We've completed 8 additional MRFs since 2021 and have plans to complete 43 MRFs or MRF upgrades by 2025. And each of those facilities will make this process even better and ensure that we can collect more of that material, divert it from the landfill, and give it a new life. So I've mentioned a couple times in the video mentioned the circular economy, and really what the circular economy just talks about is taking that material, collecting it, processing it, turning it into new material that goes back out towards consumers. And so that's this graphic on there just really demonstrates that. So in 2021, 15 million tons of materials recycled. We've been able to increase capture of plastics by 10%. And then in 2021 as well, 3.9 million tons of organic material was processed. Again, thank you for the opportunity to present. I want to just reiterate that, you know, some of what we talked about in here may not be specific to the city, but we can work with your staff if you ever want communication materials to educate your residents. We really believe that education is the #1 step in ensuring that recycling happens correctly. And I also want to reiterate my invite if anyone would ever like to take a tour of our MRF in Denver. It's in North Denver. I would love to take you on a tour of that. So my contact info is on here. So either for that or if any other questions come up in the future, would be happy to chat. So with that, I will open it up to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. Council members, any questions? Councilor Richardson, please.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the presentation, and I was really happy to hear that things aren't being shipped to China. My question for you is, that stuff that you don't sell, what does happen to all of that?
It's landfilled. Are you well, let me clarify that question. Are you talking about non-recyclable materials or recyclable materials that there's not a market for?
Recyclable materials that there's not a market for.
So typically that's stored and sold. We do a pretty good job. So we have a vast network of manufacturers that we work with. Being North America's largest provider of recycled material, we have a vast network that we work with. And so that isn't something that typically is an issue. There's a variety of ways that we can use that material if there is not an end market. So for example, glass, and I know glass isn't accepted in your stream, but it is in some communities. And if that glass ultimately gets to us in a place where it cannot be turned into new glass bottles, it can be used for landfill cover, for example. So some of the more traditional ways of reusing that material, if that's not an option available, there are still other ways that we can use it. What is landfilled is what comes to us that is not actual recyclable materials or contamination.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other questions, council members? Councilor O'Doherty, I knew I could count on you for a question or two.
Oh, I just want to thank you, and I'm also very excited that you were ahead of the curve as far as not sending stuff to China, because that's what I've heard from constituents, like, well, it's not recycled, none of the stuff's getting recycled, they're just shipping it to China. So now we have concrete evidence that that is not true, and so I applaud Waste Management and also our staff, so thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any other questions? Vice Mayor Cumby, please. Oh, Councilor Shumway. She was just pointing at you.
pointing to you.
Thank you, Mayor. When you mentioned that there's photographs and then robots remove things that are not recyclable, is that done through mechanic, or is it AI, or who tells the robot what to pick out?
Yeah, that's done through an artificial intelligence process. And so in our Franklin Street MRF, our Denver MRF, we use a product from a company called Amp Robotics. And as the material travels under those cameras, it uses artificial intelligence technology to and a lot of it goes back, I know there was a comment made earlier on the shape, a lot of it goes back to based on shape, and then that's what picks that material out of that sort line. So it uses AI to send that message, to identify that material, to send that message to the arm to pick that material up.
Thank you, Councilor. And yeah, Councilor Gabriel, please.
Thank you for the presentation, Curtis. I was curious about the situation you mentioned with the fire and the batteries. Could you talk a little bit more about what kind of batteries are we talking about and how we can educate the public not to put the batteries into the recycling cycle?
Yeah, so they were lithium-ion batteries. When lithium-ion batteries are compressed, they will explode. And, you know, unfortunately, when that explosion happens, it could a lot of times be around a lot of paper material, cardboard, things like that catches fire, is flammable. So, you know, again, it comes back to the education piece. We really encouraged, you know, communities to educate their residents. And so, you know, whatever material you put out, it's just important to remind folks, don't put batteries in your trash or your recycling for that matter. Doesn't belong in your trash because it doesn't belong in a landfill, and it does not, you know, it's not recyclable, so it doesn't belong in your recycle container either.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Anyone else? Council? Yeah, Councilor Richardson, please.
Oh, this is a comment, not a question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. And thinking about this, I'm wondering, I don't know what sort of opportunities we take for like the new student orientation at the university, but if there's an opportunity to, so this is, sorry, Curtis, not directed toward you, but if there's a possibility to have promotion or informational materials at that event or that week-long kind of event, that would maybe be a good start.
Thank you, Councilor.
If we don't already.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Gardner, thank you again for taking time to be here with us virtually this evening, and thank you for helping us improve in the ways we can. So I sure appreciate it.
I appreciate the opportunity. Have a good evening.
You as well. Director Webb?
Yeah, Mayor, if I could just close up.
Of course.
I've had the opportunity of going down to the MRF a couple times because that's what I do in my spare time. But it's a pretty amazing facility. When they talk about the stuff going across the conveyor belt and arms picking it up and magnets, it's moving. I mean, it is flying. It's amazing how quick these processes happen down there. And the equipment they have is amazing. The coolest thing, though, when I walked in, the first time I went down there, we walked through the big bay doors into what he called the tipping area where the big trucks come in and tip, and there's Laramie boomerang all over the place. I mean, that facility handles hundreds and hundreds of tons of materials, and there was Laramie boomerangs everywhere. So I thought it was pretty cool. Anyway, we thank you for tonight. Curtis extended that offer to go on a tour. If that comes up, someone wants to go, reach out to staff, and we can work with Waste Management and arrange that for you folks. Anyway, thank you very much. Yes. Oh. Charles has bags for you.
Oh, excellent. And Charles, that gives us a chance to say thank you to you as well. Just thank you for what you're doing. You can come on through the door if you want and just toss them in the air and we can fight over them. Here, I'll just take them and pass them around, then you don't have to deal with that. Thank you, Charles, I appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you, Charles. Appreciate it.
I'll get everybody a bag.
Worked with Charles when I was in the county,
Oh, nice.
at the courthouse.
That's how that happens, right?
That was good.
Well, thank you all. We're going to go to the public on this, so if there's any members of the public who wish to speak to this work session, go ahead and come forward or raise your hands on Zoom. Come on forward. We'll just need your name. You'll have 3 minutes.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Sarah Gorian, and I'm just here as a person who's really interested in recycling, been involved in it for a long time. Back when Sharon Brightweiser organized the semi-truck and barrels and what was then the ideal parking lot. That was, so we've come a long way in Laramie and recycling. And I just want to add, I love the oops stickers. I think those are pretty inspired, because I think a lot of people who are recycling almost feel like they're doing the extra bit if they throw in stuff that shouldn't be there. You know, they don't understand that there's a negative consequence to contaminating the waste stream. And so maybe, and I mean, you don't want to guilt trip people, but maybe some reminder to folks that you're not helping when you're recycling. You're actually making it worse by making it hard to market the product. I know in Fort Collins, and I'm one of the people who often end up in Fort Collins because I just go there a lot, and they have a fairly strongly worded statement on most of their containers about, you know, don't put stuff in here because it contaminates the stream. And I don't know, it might be interesting to ask if that's helped, or if they have an even higher rate of contamination than we do, but it just might, if people understood better that the recycling will be more effective if they do it right, not just like, oh, if I put this clamshell in here, it will be better, then that might help. That's all. Thank you very much. This is really interesting presentations.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
The microphone was not.
Thanks. Noted. We got it. All right. Anyone else wish to speak to the council? All right. So we'll close that public comment period and close that work session. Thank you all. Appreciate it. We're going to open our next work session, which is Boards and Commissions Review, Part 1. And City Clerk or City Manager, who's taking the lead here?
I'll bring up a presentation, Mayor, if you give me one moment here.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I thought it saved over earlier, but apparently it did not, so.
No problem.
All right, I didn't realize I was going to have the technical issues tonight. Sorry about that.
It's no problem at all.
So, Mayor, the item on your agenda tonight is a result of Councilors Richardson and Newman asking for a review of boards and commissions. So as we understood it, was kind of just reviewing what we have internally, but also what commitments the council has for external boards and commissions as well. So with that, the first slide is just a total of 16 boards and commissions that are internal to the city of Laramie. This list is all of the boards and commissions that you have adopted through ordinances over the years or resolutions. So these are directly affected by city council. So we went ahead and included those on the slide here. Note at the bottom that in February, January, February, Human Rights Commission will be coming up as a topic of conversation. So we just put a little caveat at the bottom there to let you know that there could be a 17th, depending upon what you all decide. For outside boards and committees that the city council are liaisons to, we have a total list of 12. Right now, this list came directly from your resolution that you've appointed city council liaisons to. So if there are some in addition to this that members have started to serve on, they're not included in our resolution yet at this point, so they weren't included in this slide. So just to give you an idea of where these came from. Then we gave you a copy. Yep.
Go back a slide.
You want me to go
since I don't
back?
have my computer. I just
Sure.
want to take a quick note. Thank you.
Yeah. And then we included the resolution in your packet that you adopted beginning of 2023. Just for reference, so we know who the liaisons are. Some of these outside boards and commissions have a little bit of detail as far as when they meet and things to that nature. And then, Mayor, if the council would like, we included a list of purpose and responsibilities for the internal boards and commissions. However, I'm not sure if Councilor Richardson or Newman would like to provide a little bit of information about what their thoughts were on the direction, but we have these available if the council would like us to go through each of these purposes and responsibilities, but otherwise we've included these slides for you as well. I'm going to skip ahead really quick to the end of the presentation. We included the joint powers boards because, of course, those are directly affected again by the council and the commissioners. So. And then city manager had a few notes here at the end of the presentation.
Mayor, through you, Mayor, a couple things. Thanks, Nance, for going through that. So this was, as you know, Council, a goal of yours to take a look at the boards and commissions. My intention was to address this in January at your retreat, but we're doing it early, and that's probably good because, as Nancy said, I have been kind of holding in queue for the last really about 2 years, the potential for the creation of the Human Rights Commission. I held it this year and didn't bring it to you because I wanted to let the Police Advisory Board conversation work through council to determine if you were going to create the Police Advisory Board or not, and of course you did. And that decision then influences what the Human Rights Commission would look like. So I wanted to let that happen first. So now that we have gotten the Police Advisory Board up and running, I do intend to bring the Human Rights Commission before you in probably late January. And I wanted to point out a couple things that are tied to the potentiality of the Human Rights Commission as you think about whether there are modifications that you might want to make to other boards or commissions or to your liaisoning positions. So you see with Downtown Development Authority, I'm making a note there only because it's been a topic of conversation with respect to this board for many years, that they do have a statutory mission which has never been fulfilled. So we did have a conversation, gosh, I think Councilor Shumway, it must have been 4 or 5 years ago. I'm leaning on you because I'm wondering if you remember. But we did talk for or 5 years ago about whether DDA should continue or not if the statutory mission was never fulfilled. So I just point that out, that remains just something you might want to think about and consider. Then as we look at the Laramie Advisory Commission on Disabilities, if an HRC or Human Rights Commission is adopted and implemented by you in the first quarter of '24, then we may want to consider modifying the mission or the powers, if you will, of authority for the Advisory Commission on Disabilities. And I didn't intend to go into that in any detail tonight. I just want to sort of make a mental placeholder as you think about LACD. Lastly, on this side, the Traffic Safety Commission, we may also want to consider a modified mission here, depending on HRC. And the reason for that is the Traffic Safety Commission right now, I think in the way that we restructured them a number of years ago, does include some language which I don't recall off the top of my head, but effectively makes their mission inclusive of sort of looking at the physical assets of the city, street, curb, gutter, sidewalk, and in that way, they have touched on disabled access issues, as does the Advisory Commission on Disabilities. So when you think of human rights for those who are disabled, access and physical infrastructure is one element of human rights for disabled or differently abled persons. So HRC could affect the Traffic Safety Commission as well. So those are kind of staff thoughts that I wanted to put in front of you, and then I'm going to go maybe to the next slide if I know how to do that, Nance. Thank you. So that's, first slide was our internal boards that you have really all control over. Here you see your outside boards and committees, and a couple notes here. Wyoming Territorial Park Board, the mayor mentioned this today, so I put it here. Do we need a liaison? We think that the liaison there is probably vestigial liaisonship. I don't know if that's the right word, you guys, but it goes back historically to when the territorial board or the territorial park was an amenity of the community and before the state of Wyoming took it over. So did I capture that right, Mayor? Okay, I'm kind of speaking on your behalf here.
No, that's fine.
So I wanted to mark that for our thoughts tonight. And then also the Town and Gown Committee is restructuring in 2024. You'll recall you adopted a resolution a few weeks ago that apportioned some funds for that group and our Town and Gown partners to do some training this year, and then maybe revision how that board will look at the end of the year. So we don't want to get ahead of them on that Town and Gown restructuring. I just wanted a placeholder here that they're going to think about that, and probably by the end of the year be bringing forward some recommendation to you all for how they're going to look after '24. So food for thought there. That's really all that I have from a recommendation or staff perspective, and I thought at that point we're curious to hear what you all think.
Thank you, City Manager. Yeah, council members, I think, maybe I think there are some members of boards that may watch this and think that this is sort of like punitive in some way, but I think it's better for us to have this conversation acknowledging that all of these boards do good work, and that we're all just spread very thin, so we're going to have to make some choices about where we spend our time. Does anybody have any comments? I know Councilor Richardson and Newman brought this up, but I certainly have an interest in this conversation as well. I'm happy to weigh in at the beginning if that helps. Does anybody? Yeah, go ahead, Councilor Richardson.
Thank you. Yeah, I think similarly to what you just noted, Mayor, is that we have, total, what is this, 28 boards and commissions. And I think just taking a closer look to see, at some point, we were a part of these boards and commissions for a specific purpose, but reevaluating to determine, is that purpose still, are we still needed for that purpose? Has the organization moved on in a different way? Or perhaps maybe there's a county liaison that makes more sense and it doesn't necessarily make as much sense for a city person, city council member to be on. And so I think that's where I'm coming from with this. And, maybe it's just this initial conversation today to kind of think about it a little bit and come up with a few potentials, or maybe not even there, and then dive into it more in January during our planning session. But that was my perspective on this. I'm just wondering, are there some that we just need to take a closer look at and ask what our role is?
Thank you, Councilor. Counselor Newman?
Oh, my nose. I kind of, so all these boards are obviously doing great work, as you stated. Some of the stuff that I was wondering too, is if a liaison was still necessary for some of these boards. And I know, we're looking at adding like the human rights one, we've added the police review board. I know that's not what it's called. Advisory board. If we're going to look at adding more, with us stretched so thin as it is, and I won't lie, I can't even make some of my, I won't even make some of my boards. And so like, the rifle range, I'm the liaisons, I've never made one of their meetings. They don't respond to emails, and I know like they just went through some changes as well. And the Wyoming territorial park was one of the ones that I questioned. And then Pilot Hill, I think they do a fantastic job of coming to us instead of us going to them. So I was just wondering if maybe we just need to take some of these and, you know, they're running on their own by themselves. And to be honest, I mean, how many are there? 28? Is that right? 16 the first, 12 this one? I've probably heard updates on 10, if I'm guessing. So, you know, just trying to, what's better for my time? What's better for all of our time on, you know, going to some of these meetings if they come to us anyways? So that was kind of my thinking on this work session.
Thank you, Counselor. Anyone else want to add anything? I think, you know, one of the things I have been thinking about, so I guess I would start by saying, City Manager, I am pretty fond of all of your recommendations, just to sort of put that out there. I've been wondering a little bit about the DDA specifically. You know, I understand that at this moment they are actually interested in pursuing their statutory opportunities, but there is not you know, they sort of sit in the two roles. They sit in that like vitality, economic vitality role for the Main Street organization as a board, but then they also service this thing that they're not actually using, which is the only reason we're engaged there, right? Like we don't appoint anyone to the promotions committee for Main Street or the Main Street board itself, but we, for some reason, appoint this entire board and have a council member on that board. To me, it makes sense for us to have, quite similarly to the Laramie Chamber Business Alliance, somebody on their board because we have a financial relationship with them and some sort of like service exchange for that relationship. We don't really have that with the DDA. I'm not saying we necessarily end that, but if they're not going to seriously pursue that, you know, I guess I'd just like to know where that's headed for them before we say too bad. We can always, if they pursue that, it's hard to know because I would hate to end an opportunity for revenue for the downtown revitalization, but I think if they're not going to chase it, then we're kind of in the way a little bit. The city is, and I'm not sure we have a role to play in that conversation. And then specifically on the Traffic Safety Commission, when we reconsidered the Traffic Commission previously, the thing that stuck out, and I had just looked at the bylaws, but their first sort of like charge in their bylaws was really to advise the council and city staff on multimodal transportation. And to me, as we sort of chase these carbon neutral goals and have more conversations about how this city, how people move throughout the city differently, you know, without any sort of like value statement there at all, but it might be really beneficial to have folks that are using the systems that aren't just our engineers. Like you can see how that relationship might make a lot of sense. So having folks who bike a lot telling us why our bike lanes don't work or what would work instead is valuable, and I know we have some of that coming from them soon. But to me, maybe a narrower focus might be useful. It might mean they meet less often, but to me that seemed interesting. And then I also liked the idea of rolling in the Advisory Commission on Disabilities into a Human Rights Commission. I think plenty of these will have some relationship with the Human Rights Commission. some sort of cross-pollination. But there are several that I just wonder why, I don't know what the relationship is for some of these boards, like the rifle range specifically is a great example. I'm not sure why the council has a liaison to the rifle range. I don't know if that's like a current financial relationship we have, or if it's, sort of the holdover from a time where we had one, if there's some grant tied together that ropes us in. The same with the train depot. There's several of those that I think are really valuable community assets. I just don't know, we don't have somebody on the Laramie Soccer Club board or things like that, right? So we just, as we're picking and choosing, some of those may be better served by not having us there, and then they can reach out to folks if they need to.
Absolutely. Mayor, I might be able to answer a few of your questions. I'm just going to go back.
Sorry, I threw like 12 at you at once. I was kind of just stream of conscious talking.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Some of mine, so that's perfect.
And Nancy did a great job putting all this information in the PowerPoint, but we
really
know
helpful.
that you know a lot of it, and we don't know who knows what and who doesn't know what, so we didn't want to bore you, basically, with things you already knew. But to start off with your DDA discussion, I think, interestingly, Councilor Richardson and I just came from a DDA meeting, so I would certainly say that the folks on that board right now are having some really robust conversations and have a lot of interest in the downtown and improving it, revitalizing it, continuing to revitalize it like we have been doing for many, many years. But just to remind you, the DDA is what I say is a creature of state statute. The state statute allows the DDA to be formed by you all. And it is ultimately it's a taxation district, right? And so when I say that their mission has never been fulfilled, what I mean is they've never taxed. We've had the DDA for, 20 years. And a number of years ago, they did pursue and place a tax in front of the DDA property owners, I think twice, and I could be wrong, it might be 3 times, but it failed. And the most recent effort was many years ago now. I think it was in 2007 or 8. Does that ring a bell, Pat, Joe? Yeah. So anyway, the DDA is allowed under statute, but it has to be formed by the City Council. And they do work collaboratively under Main Street. That's the plan. A number of years ago, the City Council adopted a resolution that said DDA would be the would work collaboratively with Main Street and be kind of the funding arm of Main Street, one of the funding arms of Main Street. Because from the council perspective then, and I think it's probably still a viable policy position now, we certainly as a city don't want 2 downtown entities working to do things in downtown and maybe working to do opposite things in downtown, right? So having them collaborating is just an efficiency issue. If there are any questions on DDA, here's the statutory references, and then we can go to the next thing I wanted to point out.
Please, Councilor.
On DDA, I think they're torn because there used to be, I think, 3 or 4 different components. One, historic downtown, the DDA, and then working with all these others. As far as taxation, I think it's failed. They've tried tax increment financing, that's failed. They tried direct taxing, that's failed. And they just don't seem to be able to, and all of their goals are to make improvements with the funds that they receive, and they're not able to gather those funds to make so what they do is they just talk. And then Main Street seems to be doing a great job of gathering everybody together and making progress in the downtown. I don't know what to do with that group. Until they get a majority of the people that are willing to tax themselves, I don't know that it's going to go forward, because everything they're discussing is being discussed in 4 or 5 other groups. So I think we need to, I don't know how to do that until they're willing to tax themselves and to have their members that are in their boundaries say we will have some funding mechanism. It's just not going to work. So I'm thinking just leave it until we can get someone with leadership that will come forward and say we're going to make it work and take the bull by the horns and go.
I'm going to go onto the Zoom folks real fast. Councilor Richardson, and then we'll go to Councilor Pearson, back to Councilor Newman.
Thank you. Just to the DDA, the city manager mentioned that they do have some energy. They are finding or feeling like they are wanting to find some direction and move forward. It has been a slow road, but I would personally like to see giving them a little bit of runway to attempt to get things moving and implement a tax. They'll be having a conversation with an organization to help kind of do some metrics research and some planning. My personal feeling is if, after, I don't know if it's a year or however long, there's still no action, still no movement forward, then reevaluating would be a good move. But, even if a tax isn't able to be implemented, if they are able to work hand in hand with Main Street, who is getting a lot of things done, as you mentioned, Joe, and I think a big part of that is having staff to do it, right, to be focused to carry out their mission. But then maybe we reevaluate. But if they can implement some great things, even if a tax isn't available or they can't get the tax to move through, but there's still positive impact on the downtown, then I think that board is worth keeping.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Pierce?
Yeah, Mayor, my comment has nothing to do with the downtown development. So if there are other folks that want to comment on this, I can wait with my comment. It's of course related to the topic, but not this specific piece.
Thank you, Councilor. Yeah, Councilor Newman's going to go. I'll come back to you when we wrap up.
And I also.
Okay. Councilor Newman.
Not about DDA.
Okay.
So I think this was probably one that I questioned too because of the failed tax, how long it's been around, and I wouldn't say like not a lot of work, not a lot of forward momentum, I guess would be the way to put this. So maybe like Councilwoman Richardson said, we give them a year, and I know they work with Main Street, but nothing's saying they can't continue to work with Main Street without having this board as well. And maybe they could just, work alongside Main Street. But, these are the ones that are they truly effective if they've been around for so long and haven't really, I'm not saying they haven't achieved anything, but they haven't achieved what their goal was. And that's the part that I question. And maybe we do give them, a year, 2 years, whatever that time frame is, to get back on track and see if they can get some forward momentum. And then there's, like I said, there's nothing saying that they can't just go work with Main Street instead.
Okay. Yeah, and I think in particular, this one already is sort of like they sit in two roles, right? So they meet for a while as the Economic Vitality Committee for the Main Street Alliance, and then they switch hats, and they are the DDA for a while, depending on the meeting, right? And largely, because I used to be a member of this board before I was a council member, you're the Economic Vitality Committee, and I don't recall ever actually meeting as the DDA, sort of like entering the public meeting requirements and sort of like doing all of the pomp and circumstance that means that you are now the DDA. Does anyone else have comments on this section? Okay, I'm going to go to Councilor Pierce and then the Vice Mayor. Topic change.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. My thought is I like the intent of some mergers and some reassessment on the ones that were noted in the presentation earlier, but I'd also like to suggest that there might be a few of these that we may, instead of as council members, attend these meetings, maybe we ask the group or the organization to come and present to us during a work session and tell us what they've been up to. Because, in many cases, we're not a voting member. Some of the things are or are not directly related. There's no statutory requirement. And maybe we just say to them, hey, we love the stuff that you do. We've liked it for, a number of years. And perhaps give them a work session night to just come down and say, hey, this is what we did this past year, and this is on our agenda for next year, and we need city council or city member volunteers to help us with XYZ event. And that way it would still keep us connected, but it wouldn't necessarily kind of have that requirement or the onus to actually be there, every month or every other week or every quarter or whatever their meeting schedule time is. And I guess I'd be curious to see if other council members had other ideas to kind of narrow the list, but still retain that level of communication and, sharing of information.
Counselor, are you talking about boards that if we were to eliminate a liaison to the board, then we would invite that board to come in? Or all?
Yeah, to some extent, yes, but I also think, that makes some sense to me. I guess I didn't quite think of it in terms of eliminate the liaison, but I was thinking in terms of like the territorial prison, for example. Just some of them where we know they do amazing things, but like Councilor Newman said, I don't really recall getting many updates lately since Councilor Schuster has been on council in terms of what's actually happening there.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
It does. And to be like real honest with you, when you were talking, I thought there's 28 of these. Do we really want to have a work session with 28 boards and commissions to come present? And that's why I was asking to sort of narrow down a little bit, if possible, on what you were thinking.
No.
And in
I wasn't, I was not thinking something massive like that. I was thinking like a handful, like adding another category to like potential mergers, presentation to us for 20 minutes or, something.
Right. Yeah.
For 3 or 4
aimed for an 8-hour meeting.
Groups. I don't know.
And I think in particular, like the Territorial Prison Park Board is a Friends of the Territorial Prison State Park Board. So it's not even like, we wouldn't even get a presentation in this one example. They purchase materials for the gift shop because State Parks has rules for gift shops, right? Like they operate the gift shop more or less. And they do other things, right? Like, I don't mean to say they only operate the gift shop, but it isn't like the work of the prison as the state park that we would be receiving an update on. It would be sort of like the Friends of the Territorial Park. But I was on that one before Councilor Schuster, so I'm pretty aware of what's going on. But and I have the same thought about the railroad depot. Like they're in the rifle range. Like I think again, great community assets. I'm just not sure they're. I'm saying the same thing again. So I'm going to go to the Vice Mayor.
I appreciate the point that Councilor Pierce brought up, and so then to look at these boards and commissions, I would think about what is the functionality of that board and how does it directly relate to council and city goals. And if there's a strong functional relationship there with our goals, then the role of liaison helps us to communicate to that board what our goals are. It helps us to coordinate activities, to develop coalitions that may reduce duplication of effort. And Councilor O'Doherty and I, as we've been reporting, have been working with some of the rental groups. And what we came to find out, there are at least 5 groups that are working on various rental things. And as she and I began to be representative with these groups and meetings, we have begun to come together in a coalition so that we're combining efforts rather than duplicating efforts. And it's in these key concerns that we have about the community that I think the role of liaison can be so important through that communication role and through helping them connect with other people that may be involved in the same thing. And an example that I talked about with the mayor today was, gee, like something like LCCC, do we really need someone there? And then when I linked the future development within LCCC to our economic development and the need for workforce development, then it seemed that it would be a logical place, and others like that. So bottom line, I think the functionality of these boards and how closely they're related to our goals and our initiatives and what we're trying to accomplish, that we can really serve an essential role through communicating that. And if we're not there, I think we've seen that sometimes these boards get off on something that's very different than where we're at. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilor Newman, and then I see you on Zoom, Councilor O'Doherty. Oh, I saw your hand's gone now.
I think the city manager, did you have your hand up?
Oh, it's okay.
Oh, okay.
Maybe in the queue also.
You got it.
And I think that's what I was getting at when I was talking about some of the ones that maybe we don't have to be a liaison, because they do come and present to us, and I do like that idea of if they have some updates, they can come if we're not liaisons. I don't need 28 boards to come for a work session, right? But if we can get rid of some of these. And this is just second part is, this is just a question that I have that probably nobody can probably answer. How well do these boards work together? So like the traffic board and the LACD, do they work together to kind of, make those bigger projects more doable? And if not, how can we get them to do that as well? Anyways.
It's a great question. Councilor O'Doherty?
I was thinking, is the rifle range, are we involved because that's on city-owned land? I think the city manager may have said something about that back when the voices weren't coming through clearly. So that's a question. And then, so if it's city-owned land, I think we do need to keep tabs. And then I think it would be good at our goals meeting to talk about how we can use our boards and commissions to help us achieve goals and to give them assignments, maybe like, would you be willing to work on this thing? Because, for example, the Environmental Advisory Committee would like to know how they can be more useful, and like, can you give us some task? And so, that would be good for us to decide as a body what we would like to, what kinds of things we would like to assign to them. And one of the things I was thinking, well, I was talking about composting with them, but with the LACD and the traffic, it's like, can we do a survey of sidewalks and find out where we need, what are the highest priority sidewalks to get fixed? And then how do we find some funding to help landowners and that kind of stuff? So I see it as something maybe we should be more mindful of during our goals meetings. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor. I'm going to go to the city manager and then Councilor Shumway.
Yeah, I think I can piggyback on what Councilor O'Doherty said, and I was going to address the Rifle Range Board, Mayor, because you had brought that up. And Councilor O'Doherty is correct. I would use the Laramie Rifle Range as an example of a situation where the city is involved with this board because we have a legal or fiduciary relationship with them. So in this case, the rifle range is actually leased. The city leases the land underneath the rifle range to the Rifle Range Board for the purpose of operating the rifle range. And the city acquired that land from the Union Pacific Railroad, I don't know, like 100 years ago, with a caveat that the city would always use that land for some form of public recreation. So also, a million years ago, somewhere along the way, the city agreed to lease the property to the rifle range to operate the shooting range, and then we have an agreement with them where they are obliged to provide certain days that they are open to the public, for instance, during sight-in season and those kinds of things, to satisfy the restriction on the deed that says it has to be for public recreation. So in that case, as the counselor said, not necessarily you, the council, but the city needs to maintain a relationship with them because of our basically fiduciary responsibility. Now, one thing I'll say about that board, in the agreement we have with them, they are obliged to provide an annual report to my office. We review it. I think we put it in your packet as an FYI at some point, but that might suffice. Maybe we don't need a council member to go attend. So there's opportunity there. And then if I could, Mayor, I also wanted to mention that we've talked a lot internal to staff about the notion that Councilor Doherty is touching on as far as city council adopted policy goals each year being provided to our boards and commissions and them kind of jumping on the bandwagon and helping achieve those outcomes. And we've talked about it at a staff level literally as recently as 2 days ago, where we have boards who are wanting to pursue objectives that are brand new and valid, right? Really valid things for them to work on within their mission, all of that. But imagine what that does in terms of adding on to staff time. And particularly when those are goals that are maybe very worthy, but outside of the goals we're already working on for you as a city council. If there are multiple goals that a committee is wanting to work on and say they convene subcommittees to work on that, now we have to staff all the subcommittees. I mean, it starts to just become this exponential increase in workload. So aligning, if we can, our boards and commissions that we really control, that we've created, that are part of our city governance structure here, these 16, under your goal umbrella, I think has a lot of merit. So my 2 cents.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go to Councilor Shumway and then Councilor Newman. And Councilor Gabriel after that.
Thank you, Your Honor. First of all, my comments are going to be, I think we need to take the load not so much off the council, but take it off our city manager and our city clerk. Let me mention some boards that are out there doing great work that we do not have any input into how the board is. We don't interview or do anything to create the board. And I've served on most of these boards I'm going to mention. The Downtown Clinic, Interfaith, the Soup Kitchen. Not working? Okay. All right. Downtown Clinic, Interfaith, the Soup Kitchen, ARC, Regional Services Board, Developmental Daycare, Hospital Board, Senior Housing Board, School Board, and then we don't have anyone that's a liaison or anyone that's going there, but we're always interested in what they're doing. But then we have some boards that I think that function very well, and they could function independently and then report to us, but not, I think when we have a vested interest, I think, for example, almost all the boards that are the 16 that, we have things, but here are some I think that we could move to where let them be independent, let them go out and form their boards and keep their boards going. Here, and the ones I thought about are these. The Railroad Depot, Rifle Range, Territorial Park, Airport Board, and the Art Coalition. I think they could do very well keeping their boards staffed and functioning and going without a liaison, but then if we're interested, we can go attend just like anyone from the public can, but reduce the number of people that our staff, mainly our city clerk and Todd Fieser and Janine and others have to be so directly involved in. I think we could reduce this number probably by at least a third, and they would function as well, if not feeling more independent and more able to do what they're doing. Now, I think there's only 1 or 2 that we have any budget to work with that comes from the city. and that's very minor where it is. I would like to make this to where it's not so much of having meeting after meeting after meeting that our city clerk has to go to and train and prepare and go through all the things that they do, but make it to where we focus on the ones that have a need for direct report to the city as far as the city council and also the city staff. So those are my thoughts. And by the way, those 8 or 9 that I mentioned at the beginning, they function wonderfully without us telling who's on the board, how they hold their meetings, and what they do, because they make sure that they have an interest. For example, Interfaith, they have a very strong interest in making sure that that is going well, and they have a great staff. They had a meeting today, and no one from no official person, I was there, but no official person from the city is assigned to go see how Interfaith is doing. If they went away, we'd have a huge headache. So we have a direct interest in making sure they're successful, but we don't determine their course.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Newman, and then Councilor Gabriel.
And City Manager, you might be able to help me with this. So the rifle range, since we have said, agreement with them, how come that position isn't a voting position and it's just a liaison then if we have a vested interest? And then I have another question after that.
I'm going to hedge a little bit that I don't have the document in front of me, but I suspect it's because we are the landowner and we're leasing it to that board to operate. And so their business decisions that they make about how to run the operation are theirs, but we need to be mindful of them because we do want to make sure they satisfy our requirements for public access. And some of you, maybe Joe or Pat, have been on that board and may have additional perspective.
Isn't that lease $1 a year?
Yeah, it's really a no-cost lease. In exchange for, they make sure that the public access for shooting sports is available. And technically, they are a private organization, if I remember correctly. But they agree as a private organization to run it as a private site, but make it available to the public at no or very reduced. I think it's at no cost, actually. I'm looking at you, Pat, because maybe you remember. So.
Because I remember they were on our consent agenda a while ago for raising their rates, and it was just I didn't quite understand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you remembered almost right. You were $9 off, Joe. It's $10 a year rent. Nancy has it, of course, right here. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Not a question. This was more a comment, Councilor Shumway. I do like your. The 5 that you, the Art Coalition, Rifle Range, Pilot Hill, Park. I'm wondering if we shouldn't put the airport board on there, just because of the amount of emails we have been receiving about it. And I wouldn't want them to think, or the citizens to think that we're turning our back on that one.
Well, it's a huge investment from the city.
It's also a joint powers board, so we do have a requirement on that one.
Yeah. So, but that's the only thing I had.
Mm-hmm. Councilor Gabriel?
Thanks, Mayor. I'm glad we had this conversation. It's opened up a lot. I think that when I signed up for my 3 boards, I looked at what time they were meeting so I could meet the requirements. Parks, Tree and Rec is one. The Railroad Depot Board is another, which I always attend, and the Tourism Board. And it opens me up as a counselor to so many different ideas. And I feel like I'm a more well-rounded person by attending these meetings and learning more. And I certainly understand maybe consolidating or eliminating some of these requirements from the city. But from my standpoint, I think it's wonderful that I have this opportunity. And Todd brings us up to date, the rec board meeting, and I learned a lot of different things. It's great to see the public come out and, the board members and interact on that particular board. But maybe we can reduce some of our commitments, because as counselors, we do have a lot of different things going on in our personal life as well. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Councilor Gabriel. Yeah. I think Councilor Pierce would be next then.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I would just like to add to the conversation that we need to recognize that there is a sort of ebb and flow of these particular needs or an evolution of needs, because, years ago, we did not have the Laramie Youth Council. That's new since I started on council. We didn't have Pilot Hill, when I started on council. So I think we need to kind of remember, that our needs change. And I think the whole idea of addressing this or aligning it somehow with our goals is also important. So I think we answer the community to some extent. An example of that would be the Pilot Hill. So I'd just like to add that to the conversation.
Thank you, Councilor Pierce. Anyone else? I think, City Manager, I think it would be helpful. So I do still like all of your suggestions here. I think the Vice Mayor and I have talked about LCCC a lot. One of the things that I'm interested in, I know it's on their advisory board, like their sort of Albany County advisory board. That may be a very specific thing, but it also occurs to me that maybe the way that we engage with them should be quite similar to the way we engage with our other higher education opportunities in Laramie. This one, I don't know. I've not served on this board, but I don't know what the role is like. I haven't received an update on that board, so I don't know what's happening. The last I heard, they were desperate and needed money, and we haven't heard from them for 2 years. That they were sort of in financial sort of stormy water. But I think specifically what I'm getting at. Sorry, I'm on a tangent here. Those could be served through a restructured town and gown, like, because WyoTech exists in that world. We should know what's going on at WyoTech, right? Like, for profit or not, we should know, because there's probably some synergy that we could work on together, especially when you talk about sort of like workforce development. That's what they're there for. So I think the same applies to LCCC maybe, but there may be a specific need at the Albany County Advisory Board or Council, like that may have a requirement that I don't know about. I would be interested though to know which of the boards we have these sort of like outside boards, the 12, which ones were sort of like tied in some fiduciary way. Because I am wary of getting rid of boards that we are contributing. Certainly there's the chamber, the Public Art Coalition was mentioned. We are contributing to them and work with them often. To me, it seems wise for us to continue to be a part of that. The trouble is we pick up more boards than we get rid of. And, just to be candid, Council, I am fielding the phone calls when council members don't go. And I've mentioned this before. We have boards that haven't been attended in this council. No one has been. And I hear from those people and I don't know what to tell them. I mean, I just say, well, I'll try to go, I guess. But none of us have time to pick up, 4 more boards or something. So that is part of my interest in this conversation, is sort of renewing the effort for us all to show up to our boards. And if we're not going to show up to not be on those boards and to ask for some help, I think would be a fine option. So that was 2 parts. The second one you can ignore, the second part of that.
Mayor, I was going to ask Todd to address your question about LCCC Albany County Campus Board. I believe it was tied to the potential, as you say, for a tax initiative here. Okay. But Todd is our staff liaison on the board. And Todd, could you also, when you talk about if we're required by LCCC bylaws or whatever, and then also if you could touch on, are we required to sit on the Albany County Rec Board and the beautification committee? Those 3 would be awesome.
Thank you. Thanks.
Honorable Mayor, thanks. The LCCC Advisory Board, the way that I established it was born out of the operations of the college. Now the city and the LCCC do have kind of a fiduciary or they work together. The city donated the land, LCCC, and there's some other pieces, but that's managed through agreement. I believe at the LCCC ACC Advisory Board, their bylaws indicate who's going to serve on as that position. And that brings to question in my mind, should anybody be able to say, we'll have a city council member as part of the board as on the bylaws, and do we have to fulfill that commitment? I also believe it's the same thing with the Laramie Rifle Range. I've been through the lease quite a bit with the Laramie Rifle Range. I don't believe that it's spelled out in the lease that we actually are part of the board, but through their bylaws and the creation of the bylaws, I believe is where that they probably decided that they would like to have a member of city council as part of the board. The other one that you wanted me to...
Beautification?
Laramie Beautification Committee, I'd say it's part of their bylaws, again, that they set the bylaws on who should serve on those. I can honestly say I haven't probably seen most of the bylaws. I just kind of, you come in and you get told, hey, you're attending these meetings, so you go to the meetings and learn what's going on. But more than likely, I would assume that it wasn't the city going out and asking to be part of it. But as being a player, a major player in this community, whether it's at the beautification committee when we were doing the community beautification days or community cleanup or the different pieces, and there was funding coming back and forth, it's important to be a part of those decision-making processes.
Okay, yeah, I sure appreciate that. And one of the things I think about on that topic is sometimes, even despite our best interest, council members aren't the right people, right? Like, we know things, and what do? We leave and we call Todd or Janine, and we say, hey, I just learned this, you ought to know. And I'm not saying Todd and Janine should take all of our boards. I'm just saying there is that like relationship thing that we have to contend with as council members in a city manager form, right? So worth considering. Yes, city manager,
Mayor,
before I give you all the boards.
No, that's okay, right? No, stop talking.
Yeah.
Let me, if you don't mind, just touch on a few other things on this slide, which are outside boards and committees. And like Todd said, with the three he mentioned, some of these boards, they're independent, but they have assigned a seat for a city council member. So I've talked about a couple we haven't. The Albany County Mental Health Board, the second on the left-hand column there, that is a board that was formed at the county level, and they asked for a city council person to sit there in terms of intergovernmental collaboration. So you don't really have the latitude to not attend unless they rewrite their bylaws. The Community Juvenile Services Board, that's the third down and kind of hidden there. Same thing, I believe that was formed at the county level with a seat for a city councilor. The Laramie, we addressed Albany County campus and beautification. Last on that left-hand column, Chamber Business Alliance, Economic Development Corporation. When they reorganized a number of years, they reserved a liaison position for a city council member on their board as a non-voting member and for city staff member as a non-voting member. Staff do attend those meetings. We have a pretty close relationship because this, of course, is our economic development agency that we contract with for economic development services. So it's just my opinion. I think it's always meaningful to them when they have a city council person there, but you do have that staff overlap. And so that information flows pretty freely back and forth between the city and LCBA. We talked about rifle range on the top of the right hand. We talked about territorial prison. We talked about town and gown, Pilot Hill, Public Art Coalition. On Public Art Coalition, I would agree, and you don't necessarily have to staff them. I don't know if they, or liaise to them. I don't know if they require a city council person. I will say we give them funding as an outside community partner, and we have an agreement with them, and with every community partner a contract. So maybe that covers whatever reporting annually you would need as to what they're doing and how they're spending dollars that you've apportioned to them. And then the Railroad Depot Association, I honestly don't know if their articles of incorporation and bylaws require a council member or if we just attend that as a courtesy because it's a community facility, so.
Thank you. Councilor Newman and then Councilor Richardson, please.
I do like taking like the LCCC and seeing if Town and Gown can incorporate them. Obviously, working at Wyotech, I know a whole lot that goes on, but I don't know how much they would like me to share. So if we can put them into that Town and Gown as well, and that way a liaison can can do that, and it's not coming from, me during staff meetings that we have there at Wyotech, and vice versa. I wouldn't want staff working at, the university or LCCC to come in and do that if we're sitting on city council. So that is good. I guess, city manager, you just brought up something that popped up into my head as well. If we have a liaison and a staff member there, what's the purpose? It seems like we're doing double duty at the same time, right? So whether we have a liaisons or we're paying a staff member, which one's more cost effective for us, and which one helps the board out the most? Because I'm sure we pay a good portion to staff to go to some of these board meetings as well.
Well, Mayor, through you, that's kind of a loaded question, right? Because you guys
Sure
can
is.
go for free to the taxpayer because you don't get paid for your time there, unfortunately, right? Staff certainly are compensated for our time, but most of us who liaise to boards and commissions are salaried. So, what that rate is, I don't know. It depends on how many hours you work in the week, right? I will say, though, like LCBA, we do have 2 positions reserved because the city council allocate, not this year, but in past years, up to $100,000. It's down significantly this year to a much smaller number, I can't recall. But there's that fiduciary, right, wanting to be able to answer to your constituents as to what they do for the money we provide to them. And then for the staff position, we're not so much there in that oversight capacity. We're there because we do real work with them every day on economic development projects. So, but to your point, Councilor Newman, I think there are certainly places where one person from the city would probably be okay if you guys are okay with it, and then just receiving some kind of report, as Councilor Pierce said, from that board or that body every year or through staff somehow. I also remembered, Mayor, Clerk, and I just realized you're trying to figure out how to have fewer boards on that list. Well, there's one missing that we just realized this actually should be 13 because you are also have a liaison position to the Laramie Main Street Board.
Right.
We forgot them. We left them off the list.
I had noticed that, but I thought it was just included in DDA because it's all once, right? You pick, and Councilor Richardson gets them both.
Yep,
so.
but nope, they're technically 2 separate boards, and
Sure.
sorry.
And that one, I think, makes some more sense in a very similar way as having somebody on the Chamber Business Alliance board. In that way, I think that makes more sense. So I'm going to go to Councilor Richardson. Has your hand up, then to you, Councilor Shumway.
Quick question, is the Albany County Rec Board also one of those boards that has in their bylaws, a council member appointed? I didn't hear that we talked about them.
Yes, it seems like the head nodding is yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Okay. Councilor Shumway?
Well, just thought of a board that we used to have that we contributed to, and it went away, the Civic Center Board. I think many of us have served on that. Here's my suggestion. We have 30 outside agencies that come to us every year and ask, for our support. And I think when we have our retreat, we need to say, which can we serve as well with the relationships we have with outside agencies? Which of these boards could we serve without having them lose any effectiveness if we just put them in that group of people such as outside agencies where we support them financially and also with resource information from staff? I don't want to increase from 28. I remember I used to talk about I've served on 26 boards and commissions and committees. Well, that number's probably now gone to 28 plus in the community. I agree. It's fun for us to do that, and we gather a lot of information, and we can come back together and have, a good discussion. But I think there reaches a time when we have to say, where will our time be best spent? And that will be best spent with, let's say, the top 20 boards, committees, and commissions, and then have the others in that group that we're going to support them as we do the outside agencies. And I think we need to have that discussion. We're having it now, but I think we need to maybe sit down and brainstorm at our retreat and say, how can we redesign this so it's not a burden to the council or the staff, or, and let them have more autonomy and work out their own concerns with their boards.
Thank you, Councilor. Vice Mayor.
Just to add on to Councilor Shumway, a consideration I had that some of the boards you mentioned, and I serve on hospice, and they function beautifully without the city. I'm there as a private individual. Many of these boards are nonprofits, and they have staff, and they have funding, and they have fundraising, and they have the resources to function independently, and others may not. So I'm just, that's a thought I had as you're proposing this, and I agree, but some of them do have resources that others do not.
Great point, Vice Mayor. Councilor Newman?
I do like that we, most of us have said we should talk about this at the retreat as well. I don't, my only concern is I don't want it to feel rushed at the retreat, like we actually should take our time. Like our goals, I felt were kind of like a little bit rushed because it was kind of towards the end. So if this is something that we're going to consider doing at the retreat, I want to make sure there's ample time to, that way it's not rushed. Every board gets the same kind of attention on pros and cons, or however we do that. That would be my only concern, because I do feel like the retreat was rushed a little bit.
Thank you, Councilor. I would note this is in our agenda as part one, so I wanted to ask, is there a conceived part two? I mean, because it seems we could do this again at our retreat, but City Manager, you and I had talked about a different path for the retreat. We don't have to stay attached to that, but if there was another work session planned on this topic with some of these, where we did a little bit more of the work of it, of who's going to keep a council liaison or not. Maybe we have another work session as well.
Yeah, Mayor, I think that is up to you. We did realize we'd never get through all of this in one night. And as I said, I had planned to talk about it during the retreat, but what I'm hearing tonight, I'm thinking probably not as in-depth as you all wanted. So this is a good initial conversation. What I would suggest is we have a lot of feedback, and we also probably need to go do some research to clarify. Did we choose to be on the board, or did the board put us on its own board? And so we could do some research there and maybe come back either in a work session or as a portion of your retreat, whichever you prefer, with maybe a nice spreadsheet that shows you all your options or something like that to really streamline that conversation.
And it occurs to me as well, obviously the retreat may be, it's coming soon, probably.
23rd, January 23rd.
Yeah, so, and then we're sort of swept up into budget things and sort of like more meetings than we all want to have anyway. So maybe that's an appropriate time if you feel like that's enough time. But maybe, if we're going to hop into our goals again, and, I would like the council maybe to consider that we're all still the same council and our goals are probably still the same. So small tweaks would be advisable, or updates to things that we've accomplished, not a whole swath of new goals, but it seems that maybe there would be time in a single work session. Maybe we start a little early or something to do both, because we had talked about the retreat being a Tuesday night work session instead of a whole day Saturday, to try to make things concise for everyone. Less days a week is commitment, because in this conversation, it's clear that we all have a lot of commitments to the city, and you don't get paid for most of them. And so we should be concise with our time, I think, if nothing else. Please.
Mayor, one thing we might consider, and I've heard a couple members over the last year, and then of course tonight, Councilor Newman noting that last year we felt like we ran out of time for goal setting. So let me clarify the date. We just gave you the wrong date. It's January 9th is the date that we asked you to schedule the retreat. You've approved that. We can certainly move it if you'd like. We would start at 6. You do have one quick work session ahead of that, which is the auditor reporting on the close of the audit. I see that as a 20-minute at most conversation. And then we could go into your retreat by at least 6:30. And we did program in a hard stop at 9 o'clock because it's school night, right? Anyway, what maybe I would suggest is we can try to work up a tool, like I said, a spreadsheet or something to help with decision-making around this, and we commit maybe an hour to it. If we don't get through it, then we're done with it by, say, 7:30, and we go to goal setting for an hour and a half, and we could always come back and schedule a work session. Unless you guys feel different, this isn't necessarily time-sensitive. Your goal setting is probably the bigger issue.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy. I like the sort of compartmentalizing and being okay moving on if we haven't sorted out our boards. Councilor Newman?
With a hard stop, should we do it the other way? Should we talk about our goals, so then, what if the goals go longer and then now it's 9 o'clock? So I'm wondering if we should do our goals first, because this isn't to be honest, I feel like it might be rushed just trying to get it on, and you guys using your staff time wisely, putting that tool together and whatnot, that's going to take some time too. So I kind of feel like we should reverse that, do our goals first, and then if we have time and this is done, then maybe talk about it for the last little bit. If not, totally okay with just a whole separate work session on this is kind of my thinking.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
I think I agree with that. When I'm looking at coming in here at 6 and then we're going to leave at 9, that just seems like a lot to put into that, and maybe we would be best served to have another work session on this where we focus on this and we don't try to spread ourselves too thin, starting with a work session, going on to goals, going on to that. It's just a lot, especially for evening. It's 9 o'clock at night. So I think this is very important. I think we've done significant work on it tonight, and I appreciate that. And I think maybe we would be more effective having this as a separate work session and not trying to fold it into our.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilor.
Just so you guys know what's going on in my brain sometimes. My other concern was, there are work sessions that I think are going to be 20 minutes that turn into 2 hours. And I'm not saying that would be the problem with the retreat, but we never know as well. So,
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, Councilor Shumway, please.
One more thought. I think that there's some of these boards that it makes sense that they are independent in selecting all of their board members, with us simply being liaison and staff. Others, I think we need to hear from them. Do you feel like you need more or less input from the city, so that we know what their ideas are? So whether we move them into the dependent group or the independent group, I don't want to, for example, I don't want to appoint all the people to the LCBA. Let them bring on their own board. And I think if we had to interview everyone for every one of these boards, that's all we'd do.
Right.
So I'd like to see them become more independent and have us simply hear from them on how they want to interact with the city council, with the city staff. And then I think that would shorten our discussion at the retreat.
Is it possible, City Clerk, for us to reach out to board chairs or executive directors of organizations and just maybe ask, do you want a council member on your board still? Maybe we should think about that, actually. As I'm saying it, I think maybe there's some more conversation there. But it does, to Councilor Shumway's point, I think there is a value in us asking, are we serving you by being here? Because I think there are some where we probably aren't, and it's not because we don't want to, it's just we just aren't.
Let me give you there's one example that we must continue to appoint all the people on the board, and that's the not the traffic safe, but the
Planning?
commission, the one for the, what's it called? Civil Service Commission. We need to be directly involved in all the appointments. There's only 3, and we can't abdicate that. But I think that there's some others that we may have just been interviewing, everyone on their board, and maybe they could, take over that responsibility.
Thank you. City Clerk?
Mayor, if I could, the city council currently, just for clarification, interview just the internal affected boards. So as of right now, I'm not aware of any external boards that we sit on the interview panels for. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't had any counselors tell me that they've been a part of outside interview panels.
And I think, one other, you mentioned Pilot Hill earlier, the council doesn't, I signed up for Pilot Hill as a community member, and then they said, you can be the council liaison, you can be on the board, you'll sit in this role. Their bylaws don't have a council member as a liaison. I just have defaulted into that spot, so I'm not actually sure if we tried to appoint somebody else, what would happen. It's kind of I'm not sure, I guess maybe we'll.
So in a few cases, Mayor, like the Public Art Coalition, we've made a recommendation to the Public Art Coalition. However, we can't influence whether they appoint a council member or not. So there are a few boards that we've made those, suggestions to, but having said that, Mayor, to answer your question, I think we probably could reach out to some of these outside boards and commissions to find out what our specified role is, according to their bylaws, and bring that back to you.
Okay, and I wonder, never mind, I've answered my question. Councilor Newman?
I wanted to go along with that. I wonder if we, not only ask that, but, and I know this could open up a can of worms, but it could be a good can of worms too, kind of see if the current liaison's position is working, whether or not they would still like that, or if we need to do more, less, like if they want goals, do they not want goals, or tasks, kind of, to get a better understanding on what they look at when it comes to us setting on in these positions, like do they want more tasks and that kind of thing. I think that would help, but I think that would help this discussion, because maybe, some of these boards and commissions really want to achieve something, but we're not providing something like a task for them, which could take some of our goals and help us even more.
Yeah, and I'm not altogether sold on us. I think for the internal goal or internal boards, that's where the goals make sense.
Right.
I'm not sure we should be sending our goals to outside boards, right?
That's kind of what I meant too, because
cool.
I don't like some of these. I'm like, and I'm not just picking on them, but like the rifle range. I can't think of any goal that we have that they could help with.
Right.
So that's kind of what I meant. Was like the internal ones.
Sure. Okay. Perfect. Same page then. Is there any other considerations, conversations, comments, council? I don't know what it is yet, city manager and city clerk, but it does seem like there's going to be some way that this council is going to need this information. It would be too much work to ask you to sort of collate what you did here in this presentation for our outside boards. I don't think that's fair to ask you to go through their bylaws for the 13 other boards and see how they all function. But that does feel useful. So I'm a little bit conflicted there on that time commitment. There's got to be some mechanism for us knowing how people are appointed, what role the council member sits in, is there a staff member, sort of like all of these benchmark questions that we've been asking, because that's going to be our decision, right, is with that information. It's going to be some way to have that collated in a spreadsheet or something.
Right. Mayor, my suggestion would be is we can put a little survey questionnaire together, send it out to our contacts at these places and ask them to feed that data to us.
Idea.
Recognizing though, as I realize the retreat date is so close and there's so much holiday between here and there, I actually think it's probably really good if we don't try to bring this up at the retreat, because I don't think we're going to be able to get the information all back, and then I have no confidence
Yeah.
that we can get all that information back. So we can do that, Nance, does that seem easy? And we'll have them go through their bylaws, they
Thank
can
you.
tell us what they need.
That's great. Yeah, that's a really good idea. And I think you're right. Nobody likes the person that gives you a bunch of homework before Christmas. Councilor Newman?
I just had a comment. Thanks for putting this together so fast. I know it was a lot of work, and we just suggested it, so I appreciate all the work that you guys did for this.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor.
Here, if I could, we had some intern help while they were here before the May semester ended
Yeah.
and stuff. So that's part of it. We had already kind of started this process.
Oh, great.
And then we had a few staff members, Ryan being one of them, that helped update the presentation further. So I just wanted
Oh,
to
good.
make note that we
Yeah.
did have some help from other staff members.
I appreciate that, and pass along our thanks to Ryan as well. When I see him next, I'll be sure to as well. But all right, council members, we're going to take public comment on this. If there's any members of the public who wish to speak to this work session, go ahead and raise your hands. Come forward in the room. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close public comment, and we're back to the council for council updates and comments. We'll start with Councilor Gabriel.
Well, Todd's going to be busy tomorrow night. He's got a Parks, Tree, and Rec Board meeting, which I will attend. And I also have a Railroad Depot Board meeting on Thursday this week, so I've got a couple more meetings, and that is my update.
Thank you. Your brevity is appreciated. Councilor Richardson.
No updates for tonight.
Great, thank you. Councilor Newman?
Update on Youth City Council. They're doing some good work that is matching some of our goals as well. And I enjoy continue working with them.
Great. Vice Mayor?
Planning Commission did not meet yesterday, so we probably will not meet until the first of the year. The Police Advisory Board engaged in our fourth training today, and it's really been a tremendous experience, and we've learned a lot, and all of the members today talked about that we think about things throughout the week and differently, that it's offering a very different perspective, and I think generally we are finding the training extremely helpful, and finding that the officers engaged in the training are doing a fantastic job. So
that's great. The Pilot Hill Board meets in the morning. I'll attend that one. I don't have the opportunity to take over for Councilor Shumway at Traffic Commission this week, but
It's canceled.
it's canceled, so I dodged one there.
And I'm leaving in the morning, so I won't be there for the.
There you go. It will be, I should also update. We convened the first meeting of the Pilot Hill Working Group, which is the sort of city-county with others group for Pilot Hill, and made quite a bit of progress. I mean, we have a lot of questions, plenty more questions than solutions at this point, but we are, everybody seems to be working in the same direction at this point, and that seems good. So lots of questions, mostly about funding opportunities and how that could turn into management in the future, because that is obviously the biggest question, is what happens to Pilot Hill in 5 or 10 years? How do we continue to keep it available to the public? So that group will continue to meet. We haven't set a new meeting yet, so Councilor Shumway, I'll be sure you get that, and Councilor Gabriel. But we have plenty of homework in the meantime to sort out. So Councilor Pierce, to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any updates at this time.
Great, thank you, Councilor. Councilor Shumway?
Which one works? I'll turn them both on.
There you go. Must be a trick.
Councilor Newman and I both attended Laramie Youth Council. They're a great group. We are having a meeting with Interfaith on the first Thursday In January, they're going to do a 30-minute tour of that because that's one of their goals is food insecurity. They've been meeting each time, setting specific goals for 3 different objectives that they have, and they are very much engaged. I think they will be, they're going to accomplish some great things.
That's great. Councillor Pierce, did you have something to add?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Sorry I didn't think of it earlier.
Okay.
I had a hard time hearing when the date of the retreat is.
January 9th.
Can you just...
January 9th, and it is a Tuesday.
Okay, and I heard something about the 20th. What was happening on the 20th of January?
Just a misfired date, so don't worry about that. Using some rifle range lingo. Yeah, so nothing on the 23rd. The retreat will be on the 9th.
Thank you.
You bet. Councillor Doherty, any updates?
Yeah, the Environmental Advisory Committee met, and they would like to reduce staff work rather than add to it. So we thought subcommittees could meet without having our staff involved, like if it's a sub-quorum group to talk about things like, and they want to be able to help with the carbon neutrality plan and also just education, help us get the word out about reducing carbon emissions, but also recycling and composting. And we also heard from a group in Lander that was wondering how our commission got together. They advise, but they're not an official part of the city. And then we also heard about Corinne Sheshka's report, and I have to make sure I had the right wording. She's just about ready to do the final draft emissions plan. And so if people want to read that, they can look at the agenda for the Environmental Advisory Committee and see her recommendations. But when it was reviewed by, trying to remember which outside groups, or I know, Jay Smith gave us a report of going to the ICLEI meeting, or Mountain Towns or ICLEI meeting, and said that Ms. Sheska's report really covered all the bases that he learned about at that meeting, so that was good. And then they also appointed Dr. Rod Mars to help with the stormwater ad hoc group that is being formed. I think that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Somerville had to hop off early. She sent me a text so everyone knows. I think one last thing, Council, we all received another email from users of the airport. I just want to maybe remind the people sending us emails, the Council, maybe the public, that we were days away from losing our airport. I think that seems to be lost at this point. Like, we were extremely close to having a brand new terminal with no service, with no board, with nothing. And so changes at the airport that get us closer to operating in the black are going to be uncomfortable, because we were giving gas away, right? We weren't checking our gas to see if there was water in it. But we were also charging under market rate for gas because we were thinking, oh, that'll bring people to Laramie. So when we get these emails that just feel like they're punching around, every elected official you can think of is included. Those things are going to have consequences on our airport, I think. This is my opinion. When you are taking this to our national electeds and inviting them to come see all the terrible things we're doing at our airport, when I think that this council should be incredibly proud of our airport and the way it's being managed now. When you're doing that, that's going to have real consequences, right? Like that is not, you have your First Amendment rights. You can say whatever you want to us. I just would sort of plead with those people to kind of think through the consequences of what they're doing. And I continue to be, just myself personally, quite frustrated by those emails. because they seem to be missing the entire first half of this conversation where we were approaching a failed airport, whatever it was, 46 or something FAA violations. And some of those consequential, right? Like if you put water in your plane, or gas in your plane that has water in it, your plane doesn't fly, right? Great time to find that out when you're in the air, right? We dodged some pretty catastrophic things. And I think in a lot of ways we found it just in time. And so I continue to be frustrated by those. I will read them when they come in. But I'm going to have the same response every time. I think we're fortunate to have the leadership we have at the airport. The board, I think, is doing an incredible job. And so, I know that that's not the normal way we handle council updates, so I appreciate y'all giving me just a little flexibility there. But it continues to be a frustration of mine, so I think I'll just leave it at that. And with that, council, we're going to move on to agenda review. So I think you all can take just a minute to cruise through this. I would note 9D, if you have any questions about that, the no lot sale agreements, that's just one way of them moving forward. It's an option that we have in code for them moving forward through their securities portion, if I remember correctly. So if you have questions, just reach out to planning on that one, or the city attorney. Just wanted to flag that as it's that I know that subdivision has been something everyone's paying attention to. And you'll see there, the final plat is also 9H, so it all kind of comes together. So does anybody have any questions on the consent agenda? Yeah, Councilor Shumway, please.
Your Honor, just a question, 9G. I don't know who Steiner Thusen is. What's that?
I don't know. Assistant City Manager, do you happen to know about 9G, which is the consideration of an amendment with Steiner Thusen? I figured you would.
Honorable Mayor, through you, it's just a time extension. It's the contract was originally approved by City Council, and this is our third extension. It's just a simple time extension to allow them to finish the bid documents and the construction documents.
Thanks. Any other questions? We'll move on to the regular agenda. Anybody have anything here? The 3rd Street stuff, just to answer your question ahead of time, is just a slight extension on the, it gets us like a little bit, it's another block of 3rd Street that we're going to work on, that we've been seeing increased breakage, so we're doing it before the whiteout project to resurface the street. And then a pile of planning stuff yet again. Okay. All right, council members, we will all get together in a week. We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.